And good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And welcome to tonight's very, very special Real People discussion. And I'll be talking to Johann Marx, who is an apiarist or a beekeeper. And we're going to be talking about some real issues that are happening with bees. But before we get on to that, I just want to do some housekeeping. And first of all, I got a message from Davy, and he said this morning another farmer in our small group, Willy Viljoen of Hoopstad, took his own life. And it's very, very sad what's happening out there in the farming community. So please pray for the farmers, guys. We need that rain to come down, okay? They are really desperate. And talking about farmers, please don't forget, Monday, wear black, and if you're in Pretoria and you're able to, please, 9 a.m., front of the Union buildings, at the bottom of the Mandela statue, that's where the Black Monday protest group are going to meet, 9 o'clock Monday morning. Okay, let's get back to the subject at hand. Earlier this year, beekeepers in Brazil reported losing over 500 million honeybees in only 3 months. The speed and scale of the die-offs recall colony collapse disorder, a malady that began decimating bees across North America and Europe in 2006. But the symptoms are tellingly different. Where colony collapse caused worker bees to abandon their hives and disappear, the bees in Brazil are dropping dead on the spot. And where scientists blame colony collapse on a combination of factors, the evidence in Brazil points to one overarching cause: pesticides. US honeybees just weathered an unusually bad winter. About 38% of beekeepers' colonies died between October the 1st, 2018 and April the 1st, 2019. So it's not looking good if you consider the importance of bees. And let's see why bees are so important. I'll just play you a short video clip, then we'll get Johann on.
There's very few bees.
Okay, there you go. You can see the importance of the bees. Now, I'm going to get Johann on a line right away so we can get chatting about the bees. Give me a second, guys. Hi, Johann, are you there? Oh, there we are. Okay, we have Johann online. It's just the pictures just coming through now. Johann, I can't hear you at the moment again. Do a little test a short while ago.
Okay, you know?
I can hear you now, yeah. Okay. Now, Johann, what I've done is I've just run a very short little intro to the subject, which is what's happening to the bee pollinations around the world. And before we get into that, because this is a Real People live stream, I'd like to find out a little bit about your life. Where did you grow up? And tell me about your youth and growing up in South Africa. Oh, Johann, we've lost your audio again.
Where is that? Can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. I was born in 1962 in South Africa, in the middle of the Free State. I grew up as a young South African boy. I lived on a farm and in a small little rural town. And about, yes, this is about 8 years ago now, friends of mine invited me to become involved in beekeeping. And at the time, they had some beehives down in Natal.
Right.
In the Sappy plantations in the Midlands of Natal. And initially I made a financial investment and we acquired some hives, and then over time they invited me over and started teaching me about the bees and the beehives and queen rearing and all the aspects of beekeeping. And from there, unfortunately, my friend that I started it with there passed away. And then I decided to get rid of the bees or my hives there. Because in South Africa, we have a red line that divides the country into south and north. And beehives below the red line cannot be moved over the red line to the northern parts. So I decided to sell the beehives that I have in Natal and started afresh with the beehives in the northern area and especially in the province of Gauteng, where I am residing at the moment. And in the process, I got involved with the Lions Club, of which I was a member. And in the Lions Club, every Lions Club in South Africa has to have an environmental project. And the Lions Club that I belong to, they just looked at the situation and said everybody is supporting the rhino and save the whales and save the dolphins and whatever is relevant at the moment, and nobody's actually doing something about the bees. And at the time, we spoke about the decline in bee numbers, and they decided to become involved. And then they sponsored a number of hives. They invited other clubs to sponsor hives. And eventually we had enough hives to put up a bee site or more than one bee site. And I became the beekeeper for the Lions Club. So I've got some of my own hives. And then I also have hives which is part of this project, supported by the community, supported by the Lions Club, supported by individuals, and everybody who's interested. Because you have a whole lot of people that knows about the plight of the bees. They know they want to do something about it, but the ordinary homeowner that lives in a suburb can't really do much to support the bees other than not killing them. And I had a whole lot of people who wanted to do more, and they then started supporting me with supplying a hive. We would populate the hive, we would take it out to a hive site, and then we would start educating people. We would go to schools and have talks. We would invite people to come out and see the bees. We would talk about them, about bee activity, and we would in general started to enlighten the community as to the plight of the bees and what people should do to save them instead of just having them terminated. Because at the moment in South Africa, or in the moment in Gauteng, we have a whole lot of pest control companies. So you get it that people have bees, they are scared of the bees, they are allergic, they call out the pest control companies, and those companies just poison the swarms.
Yeah. Now, Johann, before we get into that situation, there's quite an interesting discussion going on the side chat, and I just want to add to this because I grow tomatoes in a veggie patch at home. And 6 years ago, I didn't have to pollinate them because there were bees that used to come around. And in the last 6 years, well, this year, I had to hand pollinate because there were no bees. And that's a personal experience in my own little veggie patch. And
80%, 80% of what we consume in terms of fruit and veg is available to us as a direct result of pollination by insects. And it's not only the bees, there's a whole number of insects that also helps with pollination, but the bees are the main contributor. So if we basically end up without having any bees, we will also see a decline in food production because there's just nobody there to pollinate it.
Yeah, and just with that video clip that I ran just before I got you on, that was filmed by Channel 9, 60 Minutes, just a month ago. So it is very, very relative. Now,
it is absolutely. There's already countries. For instance, I think in India, you will see that people are actually now pollinating by hand. People are walking around with a feather and transferring pollen to other parts of the plant to get them to produce fruit and vegetables.
Yeah, and China as well.
Yes.
So, you've been a beekeeper now for what? 6 years. Okay.
6 to 8 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and have the bee populations in places like Johannesburg reduced dramatically in that period?
Yes, well, what I find is, besides the fact, you see, the biggest problem that we have right now, the beekeepers in South Africa, the biggest problem that we face right now is vandalism. In other words, you have a whole lot of people in South Africa. They are destitute. They are poor. They come from the northern parts of Africa, from Zimbabwe and Malawi.
Right.
They cross the river into South Africa. They are illegal immigrants. And a person like that would walk by a hive site. He's got no potential or no chance to generate an income. He's got no qualification. He's basically starving. He's got no place to stay. And then he sees, here's a couple of beehives. He would then go and use some or other substance like marijuana, take a blanket and wrap it around his body and his head, and he would take a brick or a stone or a rock, and he would go and destroy your hives, because there's 5 to 10 to 15 kilograms of honey in there that can sustain him for a week or two. So vandalism in South Africa is a big threat for the beekeepers. Then the next biggest threat is, like I said, the pest control companies. They go from house to house. They have no interest in saving the bees. They want to help the homeowner to get rid of the bees and leave a invoice for 650 to 700 to 1,000 rand, and as quickly as possible move on to the next house, because if they can do 3 to 4 houses per day, they make a very good income. So the vandals, the illegal immigrants, destroy your hives, and then the pest control companies, they don't care about whatever they kill. They just want to kill whatever insects there is and control it, and serve the homeowner with an invoice. And then the third thing is the climate. It was the first time this year that I had to feed my bees in summer, because normally we feed them a little bit in winter to get them through the winter months, because some of your hives are out in areas where there's not a whole lot of flowers and vegetation in winter. So what we'll do is we will give them a sugar and water mixture just to sustain them through the winter, to help the bees. For the first time now this year, I had to do it in summer as well, because, as you know, South Africa is now in the middle of a rather serious drought.
Yeah.
There are areas in Johannesburg and in Gauteng where the vegetation is completely depleted. So your hives that are near a suburb where people water their gardens and where there's flower production and the vegetable farms and so on, that's where the bees now go. But the bees that are out in the rural areas, they basically have nothing because of the drought. And so it's, first of all, we suffer from vandalism, we suffer from pest control companies, and then we suffer from the climate, because the bees are really suffering at the moment. The ones that we look after are doing well, but there are also hives or swarms that are really suffering.
Okay, now how can we remedy the situation with the pest control companies just killing the hive? I mean, what is the solution there?
It's basically a question of informing people and telling them that if you speak to somebody, if you have a hive problem, it is much better to get a beekeeper out to come and remove the bees and make sure that they go and resettle them. Don't just pick up the phone and go, listen, pest control, I have bees in my roof, or bees in some or other cavity in my garden or whatever. Just come out and basically help me to get rid of the problem. People should actually take note of which people are helping the bees and taking them out safely and resettling them. And they should find out which companies just basically come in and kill the bees. I have to admit that there are situations where you cannot actually save the bees, and unfortunately have to have them basically terminated. That would be in a situation, for instance, where they are near a creche or near an area where there's young children or lots of animals or whatever, because you can't control the bees. The moment you start fiddling with the bees and you want to take them out, and 60 to 80,000 bees get upset with you, you are in a bee suit, so you are fairly protective, but everybody in the immediate vicinity is then a victim or a possible victim of those bees, which they will just fly out and attack and sting whatever is in their nearest vicinity, or which they perceive to be a threat. So you do have situations where you can't save the bees. But in the majority of the instances, if you have a little bit of patience and you really want to save the bees, it's best to get a beekeeper out, and you can actually take them from there, from wherever they are, and safely. You see, the thing is, when I have to resettle a swarm of bees, it might take me 2 to 3 days. Most people don't want to take 2 to 3 days. They just go, listen, let's phone pest control. 20 minutes later, the problem is solved. So it's a question of attitude, it's a question of time, it's a question of helping the bees and understanding the process. So I think it's a situation of informing people and enlightening people as to how it really works. Because if you have to remove a swarm of bees, those bees are settled in a cavity. In the cavity that they occupy, there's a queen. The queen is laying 2,000 to 2,500 eggs per day to grow that swarm. Just to get her out of whatever cavity she occupies takes a bit of experience and takes a bit of time. Because if you don't know what you're doing, you are going to kill the queen, or you are never going to get them out of the cavity that they occupy. So there's an art in getting the bees to relocate. It's not just a question of ripping them out and chucking them in a box and driving off and putting them down somewhere and hoping that they will survive. There's an actual skill involved.
Right. Now, is there okay, let's say I'm a homeowner in Johannesburg, and I phone up a pest control place and they say it's going to cost 1,000 Rand to get rid of your bees. Now, is there a financial incentive to that homeowner to say, no, I'm going to use a beekeeper?
No, there is none. There is nothing. The homeowner who makes the decision to save the bees only knows that he's helping the bees, and it might cost him a little less than 1,000 Rand. And in some instances, if there are bees on your property and they are really easy to remove, in other words, they've just swarmed there, they are trying to find a new cavity to move into, and it's a question of just arriving and picking them up, or snipping off a branch and removing them quite easily and without any hassle. We might even do it for free.
Right. Okay, so what you're saying is that there is a slight financial incentive for people to use a beekeeper as opposed to using a pest control company.
Yeah.
And the only difference is that you basically take a longer period of time to take them away compared to a pest company, which might take 30 minutes, but then you've got a whole lot of dead bees in your roof or wherever.
Yes.
And isn't that a problem?
Well, the thing is, I think we should do everything humanly possible to help the bees, and by just killing them, it doesn't really help us in the long run, and it surely doesn't help the bees. So I think people should just think carefully, and they should make a decision as to, we want to contribute to saving the bees or helping the bees.
Yeah.
And if it takes 2 days of our time instead of 30 minutes, and we will allow the beekeeper to do his thing, and we will assist them, and even after I've removed a swarm of bees from your property, and you want to come out and have a look and see them in a hive, I'll put you in a bee suit, and I'll take you out there and show you what you've achieved. So I just think it's a question of informing people, enlightening people, and educating people as to the bees are our friends. That is, without the bees, we are in a spot of trouble. So save them. And you don't have to do a lot. I mean, it's a telephone call, and you get a proper beekeeper who's registered with SABIO, which is the South African Bee Industries Organization. They have a proper number, and they can give you a reference as to where they are, what they do, and how they do it. You can be part of the process, and it's an opportunity to teach people.
Right. Now, you mentioned that there are about 60 hives a week which are basically terminated by pest control companies in the Johannesburg.
60 swarms per day.
Per day?
60 swarms per day. That is the average that people talk about, and those are the numbers being thrown around in South Africa. In Gauteng, we have 60 swarms of bees terminated by the pest control companies per day in
That's-
Gauteng, which is
that's
just
awful.
one province of 9.
That's awful. Now, I've got
Yeah.
your Facebook page down below this video if anyone wants to
Yes.
contact you, and that is Orion Beekeeper. Is it BYE Boer?
It's actually, yeah, Baie Boer.
Baie Boer.
I'm a
okay.
beekeeper in the Afrikaans for
Ah.
beekeeper is a Baie Boer.
Okay.
I'm farming with bees. I'm a bee farmer. The Afrikaans is Baie Boer.
I got it.
Yeah.
So,
So they can search, they can type any of those words into Facebook and they will find us there. Please make a comment or talk to us.
Yeah.
We need support. We need a lot of stuff in South Africa. We need support. For instance, when we had those massive veld fires down in the Cape, in the Knysna area, we actually went down there and we put out sugar water for the wild swarms, because lots of beekeepers there, lots of bee farmers there lost their hives. Their hives, that was covered by insurance, but there were a lot of wild swarms that basically, after the fires destroyed all the vegetation, had nothing to eat and nowhere to go. And we went down there and we had donations of sugar, and we took out lots of water, and we actually filled farm dams with sugar water so that the bees can survive. And you could actually see the bees arrive and taking some of the water and taking some of the sugar and taking some of the nutrition that we put down. And I believe the wild swarms, a lot of them survived as a result of what South Africans did. So people are aware, but they don't really know what to do. So they must come and contact me. They must talk to me. There's a whole lot of people that says, I want to keep a swarm on my property.
Yeah.
That's not always a good thing. But we have to assess every situation. We'll assist people. And I'd much rather have you support the Lions Club with a hive. And then we'll take the hive out to a hive site. We'll put your name on the hive as an indication of your contribution. And if you want to come out and see your hive, I will assist you. I will take you out there, put you in a bee suit, open the lid, and take out the frames and actually show you the queen and how they work and what they do. Bees are amazing.
oh, they're incredible. I mean,
Oh yes.
I just am in awe of the way they operate and how they find their way back. How do bees actually find a flower and then find their way back? I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? Have they worked
Okay,
that
the
out
way-
yet?
Yeah, no, the way I understand it is a bee would fly out of even if it's a cavity or even if it's a beehive, the bee would fly out of the beehive. He would then turn around and take a mental picture of the hive that he is occupying at that very moment. Then he would fly off and he would find a flower or a food source. He would fly back to that specific hive, and then he would have a little dance indicating to the other bees the direction and the distance of the food source. But the interesting thing is, we would put down sometimes up to 80 to 60 hives on a specific hive site. And not a single bee would go to the wrong hive, because if he goes to the wrong hive, he gets killed. Every single bee goes to the hive that he belongs to, and as he enters the hive, he bumps heads with the guarding bees who's sitting at the opening, and if he's not of the right smell and the right pheromone, he would not be allowed inside that hive. They would kill him instantly. So you can have a site with 80 hives standing right next to each other, and every bee will return to his specific hive and not go and visit another hive because he would lose his life. It's amazing.
So their communication for actually finding like a garden of flowers or something like that involves this little dance that they do in front of the other bees.
Yes.
And they
Yes.
from that dance can work
Yeah.
out exactly how to find that garden.
Yes, in a hive you have a whole lot of bees doing different doing different things. So you have the new bees, they clean out the hive. And then you have the fetching bees. They would go and fetch pollen, and they would fetch nectar, and they would fetch water. Because water is a very, very big part of what's going on inside a hive. They do evaporation cooling. For instance, if the outside temperature is 40 to 42 degrees, the temperature inside a hive is a constant 34 degrees centigrade, because that is the temperature at which the eggs laid by the queen will actually hatch. So you will have a number of bees in that hive carrying water, and as they enter the hive, you will have a whole number of bees sitting inside the hive and flapping their wings, so that the water evaporate and keep the temperature inside that hive at a specific 34 degrees so that the eggs can hatch. So you have fetching bees and guarding bees, and you have bees on the inside that looks after the queen, and they look after the young bee. You have new bees that clean out the hive, because if it's not clean, you attract all sorts of insects and whatnot. So every bee inside that swarm has a specific duty depending on his age, because as he grows stronger and bigger, he would progress to either fetching or defending or whatever the task might be. And so the thing is, when a bee goes out and he ages, a bee lives between 28 and 42 days.
Right.
So when the bee is actually getting to adult stage, he gets assigned a project. He will fly out in a direction. He will find the flower or the source of food, and he will go back to the hive, and he will fetch all his other bee colleagues, mostly female, because in a hive there's a huge minority of male bees and a huge majority of female bees. So mostly 99% of the bees in a hive is female. So they would then go, and the bee that comes back would do a little dance, and in that dance will indicate direction and distance. And then the rest of the bees will follow her, and they will start collecting whatever she's found and bring it back to the swarm.
Wow. Now, how do they select a queen bee? Because that is extraordinary how that happens.
Yeah, what happens in a normal situation is you would have a swarm. They would occupy a cavity, and when the bee queen, who lives to between the ages, she lives from 3 to 7 years. When she gets to the end of her lifespan, or when her egg production goes down, she would sense that and then decide she will make a new queen. Then what she will do is the bees will form a queen chamber. She would lay a specific egg in that queen chamber, and that queen chamber will then be filled with royal jelly and with all the nutrients and whatever that is needed to create a new queen. That new queen will then be sealed inside the queen chamber, and just before she hatches, she will do a thing called piping. And piping refers to a buzzing noise that she makes, warning the existing queen that she's about to hatch. And then the existing queen will take half the swarm or a section of the existing swarm. They will fly out, they will find a new cavity, and then the new queen will hatch, and she will be accepted by the rest of the swarm. If the old queen or the existing queen who produces the new queen doesn't leave, the new queen that hatches will basically kill the old queen, because there's just one queen in a swarm. So when we catch a swarm, or when we artificially create a queen, we will put her in something called a queen chamber, which is basically a little box covered with gauze, so that the rest of the bees can smell her pheromones. They can get close to the queen, but they can't actually kill her. And then if we leave her in there for 3 to 5 days within the new swarm, they will sense there's a new queen, they will smell her pheromones, they will accept her, and what we do is we put a wax plug inside that little box, and the ordinary bees will start eating out the wax plug, and by the time they've eaten out the wax plug, they've also accepted the queen, and that queen will continue with that swarm. So it's a whole science.
That's absolutely, I mean, you can't make this shit up.
No, that's why I love the bees. That's why I love the bees. To this day, there's still a whole lot of things that bees do that we don't understand how they do it. We just know that they do it.
What is a good example of that, Johann?
That is, well, a good example is that creation of the queen. When does we don't know when the old queen decides that her time is up. And it's amazing. They've observed this and they've investigated this, that when the old queen, when an existing queen gets near her expiry date, she will create a new queen, and then she will walk away from the swarm and go and die somewhere else when it's her time. Because if all the bees that die after 42 days or whenever their lifespan is up, if they all die inside the swarm or just outside the hive or just outside the cavity that they occupy, it will attract a whole lot of insects and whatever that eats dead bees, and even birds that eat dead bees. So what they do is everything that a bee does is to the benefit of the swarm. So when they feel there's a problem, that's why they attack. When they attack, they lose their life. I mean, a bee that stings you basically dies.
Yeah, because it loses half its body.
He does it for the good of the swarm. Well, he protects the queen and he protects the swarm. That is when you open up a hive, or when you find a feral swarm that's just flying around, you will see there's a whole number of bees that basically forms a ball around the queen. And all they do is protect that queen. If you remove the queen from a swarm of bees, none of the bees knows what to do. They disperse. They don't come back. They don't know what their functions are. They get all confused, and it's weird. At the moment, as long as there's a queen inside the swarm or inside the hive, everything has order. Every bee knows exactly what to do, and every bee does whatever he needs to do to the benefit of the swarm. That's the amazing part.
Yeah.
And you know what? When a bee queen starts a new swarm, when she hatches, she would spend the first 4 or 5 days with the bees. Then she would fly out of that hive up to 3 to 5 kilometers high.
Wow.
A male bee is called a drone. The drone a number of drones will follow her. The strongest ones will keep up. She will match, or she will mate with a number of the drones, and she will come back to that specific hive where she was just hatched, and she would have enough sperm with her to last the next 3 to 7 years, laying 2,000 to 2,500 eggs per day. That's her job.
Oh, wow. That is just
amazing.
Phenomenal stuff.
That's fantastic.
I have to tell you a story. I had a farm in the Drakensberg, and it was a beautiful, beautiful sunny day, and I heard this buzzing noise. And you know, when you hear a swarm of bees getting closer, you can just it's that noise. And I'd been told you just lie flat on the grass with your face in the ground and until they've gone past. And it was quite extraordinary, because the swarm actually came right over me. And, you know, I could hear the bees very close to me, and you know, they came right over, and it took about 30 seconds for them to go past. That was scary, I tell you.
Yes. Well, if you are attacked by a swarm of bees, you do not jump in a body of water. Most people think that if you are attacked by a swarm of bees, the first thing you do is jump in a pool. That's the last thing you should do, because bees, they have energy. I mean, 60,000 bees can hover above your swimming pool for an indefinite time, and then a bee stings you in less than a second if you emerge from whatever body of water that you're in to take a breath. So if you jump in a swimming pool and you surface for a breath of fresh air, 20,000 bees will sting you before you put your head back under the water. So if that's the last thing you do not jump into a swimming pool when bees attack you, because you will drown inside that pool. You crawl into a cavity, you crawl under a vehicle, you get inside a vehicle, you cover your ears, your nose, and orifices that they can get into. You offer them a hand or an arm or a whatever. You keep them away from your face, and you get to a hospital or a doctor as soon as possible. You do not jump into a pool. The bees will kill you in that pool before you can get out.
Wow, because I've always thought that that's what you do, is you jump in a pool.
Don't jump in a pool. It's the last thing you want to do.
Wow. How many people a year get killed by bees in South Africa? Do you have any idea on that?
I don't really know, but there's quite a number. I've had the unfortunate situation, and people think, I don't know why most people think that when I'm in a bee suit, I'm in control of the bees. I'm not in control of the bees. We recently, me and my beekeeping partner, removed bees from a sidewalk. And the bees they've been in the cavity for quite a while, and they were quite aggressive. And you can see that from the way they attacked me while I'm in my suit. And the homeowner of the house where we removed the bees, I asked him to put his animals away, which he didn't do. And the bees basically killed 2 of his dogs in the garden. And there's nothing I can do to stop that. There's nothing I can do to control that. We spray them with sugar water. We smoke them a little bit. People think that you smoke bees to drive them away. How it actually works is, when you smoke a swarm, when you give them a little bit of smoke, the bees think that there's a veld fire. When they sense the smell of smoke, all of the bees will go into the hive and they will consume as much honey as possible, because they understand that if there's a fire, we have to relocate, and if we relocate, we're going to need all the nutrition that we can. So they basically go and collect as much honey from their own honeycomb as much as they possibly can. And then when a bee is really gorged himself on honey and is really full, then he can't sting you because he can't bend his abdomen. That's why we smoke them. But smoking them is not driving them out. Smoking them does not motivate them to relocate. Smoking does nothing but force them to eat a little bit of honey so that they gorge themselves so that they can't sting you. So the instances of being stung, if I work with a swarm of bees and there's 60 to 80,000 bees in a hive and I smoke them a little bit, 10 of those bees would make an attempt to sting me, and the others would just be there. They would just be happy, or they would be unsettled, but they wouldn't sting me. And that's the reason we smoke them. In most instances, when I have to remove a wild swarm, we will spray them with sugar water, because the moment you spray them with sugar water, they start cleaning themselves and each other, and they leave you alone. So we have little tricks, and we have tested methods to work with the bees. We don't just walk up to a swarm and rip the lid off and jerk everything out and claim that we can control the bees. That's not the case. The bees are wild. Even if I take out a swarm and I put them in a box or I put them in a hive on my hive stand and they decide to stay, I would go back the next morning and I would thank them for staying in the cavity that I have created for them, because they can fly away within half an hour of settling them in the hive, and they do that. I mean, sometimes we lose up to 50% of the swarms that we go and remove from people's houses. We go and put them in a hive, and the following morning they're gone. You can't control them.
Well, we've had a couple of questions that have come through.
Yes.
And one here is from Max, who says, how are you dealing with the Varroa parasites?
We try our best to prevent it from infecting our hives. And when you find an infected hive, unfortunately, you have to burn it. But we do have a powder, and we do have medication that we give the bees, and we do have areas where the varroa mite is actually quite present, and then we have areas where you just don't have that problem. In other areas we have wax moth, and in other areas we have nothing. So first of all, we keep everything as clean as possible. We inspect our hives regularly, which when I say regularly, weekly. You go in there, you have a look, you know what to look for, and you just try. Prevention is better than cure.
Right. Now, how many hives do you look after for the Lions Club? I mean, how many?
200.
You got 200 hives?
No, I've got many more than 200, but 200 belongs to the Lions Club.
Wow. So I guess the benefit of doing this is the honey that you can harvest.
Oh yeah, of course. We harvest, but like I said, right now your honey production is very low. It's below par because of the drought. So what happens is you have a hive has different sections. The bottom part is called the brood box. that is where the swarm and the queen lives, and the outer frames, there's 10 frames inside a hive. And then what we do is, on top of that, we will put down a separate section where the bees are, because a bee is basically programmed to make honey. So we will add stacks to the brood box, and as we put stacks on top, the bees will go in there and produce honey. But the queen essentially remains in the bottom part. That's where she's laying the eggs. That is the honey that's contaminated with larvae, and it's contaminated with young bee and eggs, and we don't normally fiddle there. But there's 4 of the 10 frames is basically honey that the bees eat themselves for their own consumption and to sustain themselves. And then in the top part, that is the honey that is being produced for the beekeeper, and those are the sections that we harvest. And you can see, even if I go to my hives right now, you will see that they produce enough for themselves and that you don't fiddle with. And then the section, the super on top of the brood box that you can take for yourself, the honey production in there is below par because of the drought that we have right now.
Wow. Well, I remember an experience I had, this was back in about 6 years ago. And this was in South Africa. I was visiting South Africa. And I was visiting this Griqua farm called Ratelgat, which is, anyone who speaks Afrikaans knows what a Ratelgat is. That was the name of the farm. But it's in the Western Cape, and it's sort of in a very dry area. And this guide took me for a walk, and we went into this dry riverbed. And above us in the rocks was this huge honeycomb. I mean, it was like old honey, and the old comb, and then there was new honeycombs, and it was a very, very old wild bee nest. I mean, how does that work?
Well, it basically works the same as with a hive, but in a wild situation, in a wild honeycomb, it is very difficult to have pure honey and honey that is full of larvae and eggs and young bee and whatnot. So what happens is, when you get to a wild swarm situation where there's just wild honey, unfortunately, when you remove that, you kill a whole lot of young bee, you kill a whole lot of larvae, you might even kill the queen, and that's why we do it in a controlled environment. Because if I take a swarm of bees and I put them in a hive, I control them. I leave the brood box is where the swarm is, where the queen lives, where the eggs are being laid, where the new bees are coming from, and we put a super on top, and that is where we harvest the honey from. So it's very difficult to harvest pure honey just from a wild sort of setup or a wild honeycomb. You will find that in wild honeycomb, the bees instinctively know where the honey is. You will see that it's full of larvae. You will see that there's a whole lot of eggs, and it's just difficult. It's actually damaging to a swarm just to go in there and remove a wild honeycomb. There's lots of people that would phone me, for instance, and say, listen, I've got bees on my property. They've been there for 3 years. And then when you go there and you open up a brick wall or a chimney or an air brick in a bathroom and you chip out the wall, the person who owns the property says, yes, now can I have some of the honey? You can have all of that honey, my friend, because it's contaminated. It's not pure honey. Pure honey is cultivated. Pure honey is made by the bees, because the beekeeper knows how to motivate the bees to go and make honey in a section of the hive that we remove for our own benefit, for having the honey. That is why I'm a beekeeper, and I'm a honey farmer. I know how to produce honey by helping my bees and by assisting the bees and by motivating them to go and make pure honey in a section of the hive that I can remove for my own benefit.
Right. Now, Marlene asked a very interesting question here. She said, for promoting the idea of actually people using a beekeeper against having a pesticide company coming out, Have you ever, or do you, give talks to school groups because they talk to their parents?
Yes, we do. We will take, I will go to any group who wants me there. I will take a hive. I will explain to them how it works. We've been to a whole number of schools, and the Lions Club in South Africa also has something called the Leo Club, which is junior lions. In other words, they are members of the Lions Club, but it's school-going children. And we go from school to school. I will take a bee suit, I will take a smoker, I will take a J tool, I will take frames full of honey, I will take a slide presentation, we will take whatever material is available to tell them about the bees and whatnot, and we will go and give a talk. For sure we do that.
Okay, now if someone wants to adopt a hive, what is the cost of that?
Yes. Well, a hive normally is about 1,000 rand.
So
1,000 South African rand. That's
okay.
the cost of a hive.
So you're talking about your hive with your name on would cost about 1,000 rand.
Correct.
Okay, that's pretty reasonable. Now we've talked a lot about the bees.
But we have other needs as well. I mean, we have spoken and we are speaking to Lions Club International. We've had some of the senior management of the Lions Club in South Africa. Our ultimate aim is to put up a bee laboratory where your students can come and study the bees. We would like to have a piece of property where we can actually put down our specific hives and produce a specific honey and whatnot. But for that we need about 3 million rand. And that is a rather serious investment, and we are talking to a whole number of people that's interested in going that route and assisting the bees in that way. But that's a whole different story.
Yeah. Now the elephant in the room question
Yes.
is, why are bees so important to human beings?
Pollination.
Okay, well just go into detail. Tell us exactly how it works. What is the effect if there were no bees? What would happen?
Well, the thing is, there's a whole lot of plants that is dependent on production, on growing a fruit or growing a vegetable. And they need the bees to pollinate. In other words, you need a bee to climb onto the plant. So what the plant will do is it will attract the bee with nectar. That is the sweet stuff.
Yeah.
So the bee would come, and to collect the nectar, he would crawl inside the plant. When he crawls inside the plant, there's hairs on his body that collects the pollen. The pollen will be transferred between the male and female parts of the plant. The plant will be pollinated, and it will produce a peach or a cauliflower or a whatever. And if that doesn't happen, that plant produces nothing. So it is essential. If the bees doesn't do it, somebody else must. And if there are no insects to do this, I mean, you have butterflies doing it, you have flies doing it, you have all kinds of other insects that helps with pollination. But bees are the prominent pollinators of plants worldwide. And you will find, I mean, there are farmers in the United States, for instance. People understand the role of the beekeeper much better than in South Africa. In the United States, for instance, you would have farmers that would have a contract with a beekeeper to bring out the hives and put them next to the farmers' fields, whatever they produce, be it pecan nuts or be it sunflower or whatever, because that farmer understands that if he has a contract with the beekeeper and the beekeeper brings his bees and puts them next to the field, that farmer can increase his harvest by up to 60%.
Wow, 60%.
So they pay the beekeepers to bring out beekeepers. Beekeeping in America, for instance, is a whole different industry than in South Africa. In America, they would have a standing contract with the beekeeper. They would pay a fixed fee, and the beekeeper would deliver his hives for a specific time while the plants are in flower, and then he would remove them afterwards, and the farmer would benefit from the increase in his harvest production.
Now, do you have South African farmers who do the same sort of thing?
Yes, we do. But in South Africa, it's a different ballgame. You have a whole lot of farmers that says we don't need the beekeepers, we will just work with whatever bees are available. And then unfortunately, because of the high level of crime in South Africa, I've had it myself, I've experienced myself, where farmers would go and say, you used to put your hives out on my fields, next to my orchards or whatever. I cannot renew my contract with you because it attracts all sorts of vagrants onto my farm. I need to give you access to the property so that you can look after your hives. I don't know what people you are bringing on, and because of the high level of crime, we cannot afford to just leave the gates open and leave anybody to get access to our properties and to our farms, so we'd rather not have you here. So it is a difficult situation. I've lost contracts with farmers because of this, the very same reason that I've just mentioned, where people say, you can't bring your farm, sorry, you can't bring your hives onto my farm. It's a security risk.
Wow.
So it's a different situation in South Africa.
That's so sad, isn't it?
It is, yeah, it is terrible.
Now, South African has written just one more thing. Bees were imported from Africa to South America and ended up escaping and breeding with others, creating what became known as killer bees because they are more aggressive. Now, how would that have happened, seeing that they are so choosy about who they allow into the hive?
Everybody has got their own opinion about this. My opinion is that you have different strains of bee, which is only really known to the scientists because they dig into the DNA and whatever. I don't think you have a killer bee. I don't think you have an Africanized bee. I don't think a bee is a bee. Some bees will sting you, some won't. Just as some people might attack you and some won't. They have different temperament. They are aggressive at different times of year. And if you know the bees, and you will understand this, if you get to the end of winter and you approach a swarm of bees, there's a very likely chance that they will attack you because they are protecting whatever little food source and honey they have left, waiting for the rains and the new spring and the new flowering and whatever to happen. While in the middle of spring, I will approach a swarm of bees and they will be docile and they will work with me, and I will open the lid and look at them without even wearing protective gear. But different times of year, bees react differently for different reasons, and I don't really think that we have killer bees. I found that I've got a number of swarms. I can tell you now which swarms are aggressive, and I can tell you which of my swarms are docile, and I don't know why. I can't explain it, I can't change it, and I just know when I go to a specific hive, I had better wear protective clothing in that instance because they are quite aggressive and active, and they will protect and they will attack you. And then when you get to another hive, you know that you can open this up and they are all friendly and they just sit there and go about their business. So I think this Africanized thing and killer bees thing, that is just somebody's opinion. I don't know about that.
Wow. Okay. Now, I'm just blown away about how they work. I mean, you're talking about the different duties they take on and stuff like that.
Yes.
And what I've noticed is that they seem to work as a team. They just seem to, they always seem to have a common goal, I guess is the word. Do you think there's an element of them being psychic and just being able to communicate somehow psychically?
Those are the things we don't know about the bees. I mean, you see a swarm. In a hive, there would be 60,000 bees. The moment you remove the queen, nobody knows what to do. The moment you put the queen back, the bees instinctively knows, I have to collect pollen, I have to collect nectar, I have to collect water, and some of the bees will look after the queen. They will feed the young bees and the new ones, and some of them will clean out the hive. How they assign those duties, we don't know. We can guess, and we can investigate, and we can study the bees, and we can see that a bee hatches and then for the first 5 days he would just walk around and clean and carry out bee poo and leftovers and droplets and whatnot, so that it stays clean inside the hive itself. Then from there he will be assigned a duty. So first of all, he would just test his wings, and he will sit and he will beat his wings to create airflow through the hive to keep the temperature even so that the eggs can hatch. And then after a few more days, that bee will fly out and he will join the group that either collects water or pollen or nectar. We don't know how they do this. And then from there, that is what he will do until his wings are so broken that he can't do it, or he gets to the 40 to 42 to 45 day age limit, and then basically just perishes. Those are the things we can study and study and study and investigate ad infinitum, ad nauseum, and we will never know how they do this. That is what fascinates us about the bees.
I can't get how they suddenly know that they move on to another duty. I mean,
Yes.
that is just crazy.
Nobody knows how. They just do it.
No,
And we observe it. We see how they do it. We can look at it and we can see that a bee that hatches lives in the swarm. He lives in that hive. He doesn't go out for the first 5 days. Then after 5 days, he will take a short flight out and test his wings. And then he comes back and he gets assigned. We don't know assigned by who. We don't know how they decide. And then he goes out and he collects stuff, and he just flies out and comes back and flies out and comes back, carrying his little load until he dies, and that's it.
Now, when he dies, he doesn't die inside the hive.
No.
He goes somewhere to die, doesn't he? He doesn't
as
pollute
far as possible, so that they do not attract insects and whatnot that eats the dead bees. So he will fly away from the swarm. He will always do what is best for the swarm. That is just what they do.
That's absolutely amazing. I mean, bees are just fascinating things.
Yes.
Look, I think there are going to be quite a few people who watch this video who will be wanting to talk to you about, bees and stuff like that, because it really is an amazing subject. What is your most scary situation you've had since you've been an apiarist?
Well, I tell you, the scariest bit is when a whole lot of people decided to support what the Lions Club are doing, and they contributed finances and they contributed hives, and we've got hive sites all over Gauteng. So
right.
I've got some in Pretoria where there's aloes. We've got some in different sections of Gauteng where there's different vegetation and flowers. And then some of these Lion Club members, I think they misunderstood the whole thing, because they wanted to see. They were so happy about helping the bees. And I've got about 3 bee suits, because they're not exactly cheap.
Right.
They are quite expensive. So I've got 3 suits myself. And then the one club just basically insisted that they want to come and see the bees. Come and see the bees. We want to see the hives. And the more I say, please, 3 people at a time, they decided that this was a club event. So they arrived at a hive site with a number of vehicles. They brought underage children, like 5-year-olds. They brought all kinds of snacks, dripping with sugar and syrup and sweets and cold drinks and whatnot. They were all dressed in slacks and t-shirts, because for some or other reason, people are under the impression that if the beekeeper is there, the bees are under control. And that day we actually had a very, very, very scary moment where we had to evacuate the people. We had to take them to hospital. Some of them got they got stung 90 times. The children got attacked. And that day, everybody learned a lesson, including myself, because when people nag you to come and see the bees, and they keep nagging you for 3 months, eventually you give in and you go, okay, come to the site and see the bees. If that will make you happy, you are contributing towards the program. You are contributing towards our project called Saving the Bees One Hive at a Time. Okay, come and see the bees. And I was thinking I would take them and put them a distance away, and take them 2 at a time and open a hive so that they can see what goes on the inside. Unfortunately, when I put some of them in bee suits and took them to the hives. When I looked over my shoulder, the rest of the club was standing right behind me.
Oh,
And
God.
once again,
Oh.
that was the scariest moment of my life, because those people got attacked, and the moment the bees started stinging them, they started running and screaming, and that's the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
And eventually we got them all into vehicles. We all got them out of the area. The ones that needed medical attention was taken there, and then I wrote them a nice email, and I said, please, can you see now that this is a very dangerous thing if you are not prepared and if you don't know what you do. This is not a spectator sport. This is, you are supporting the bees. Trust us to do the right thing with your contribution. We will send you pictures. We will send you photographs. We will send you videos. We will even give you some of the honey that comes out of there. We will give you a constant feedback, but this is not a spectator sport. You can't rock up at a hive site where there's 110 hives containing 60 to 80,000 bees per hive, because the moment you start working there, those bees are going to defend and they are going to attack whatever is in the vicinity. And that was a scary, scary moment for me.
I bet it was. Now, bees tend to attack as a group, don't they? So if one bee actually goes for someone, you find all the bees just buzz around and attack that same target, don't they?
How it works is that the first bee that stings you leaves behind the stinger, which is an integral part of his body, and that stinger sends out a little signal to all the other bees.
Wow.
So it sends pheromones, and it sits in your skin, and if you look under a magnifying glass, you will see that it pulsates.
Pumping,
it's pumping poison into your body so that it gets the maximum effect, and in the process of doing that, it sends out pheromones to all the other bees, indicating that this is the place to actually attack. So when you have, for instance, a wild animal like a raccoon or a rat or something attacking a hive, the first bee would sting that rat in a sensitive place like the end of its nose or an eye or an ear, and then all the rest of the bees will zoom in and zone in on that specific little beacon that was left there. And that's why you will find that bees attack one specific spot, because they have a little radar that says, come and attack here. This is where I found a weak spot, where the veins are the closest to the skin, where there's not a lot of hair, where there's a whole lot of nerve points, and where the animal that we are attacking, or whatever we are attacking, the threat that we are attacking, has a sensitive spot. And this is where you place your stinger, because every stinger that gets placed is costing a bee its life.
Yeah.
So they can't waste it. They must use it to optimum effect. So that's why they will go for the eyes, the ears, the nose, and all the extremities of the body where there's not a lot of hair, and where there's the nerve endings and the blood vessels are very close to the skin. So they will go for your wrists, they will go for your ankles, they will go for your ears, and then they will go for nose and eyes. So that's just a defense mechanism.
That's extraordinary. Now, I saw this video footage a long time ago now about a wasp. I think a wasp is the most dangerous thing for a beehive, isn't it? Where a wasp actually goes into the beehive, and how the bees respond and attack it. And
yes, the bees cannot actually penetrate the body of a wasp. So their way to kill a wasp is to ball it. In other words, a number of bees will surround it. They will form a tight ball, and they will vibrate their wings, and to the point where they generate so much heat that the wasp actually dies. So they boil it to death. They cook it.
You're joking?
Yes.
That's incredible.
They create so much heat in there that the intruder that they cannot penetrate with their stingers actually dies from heat exhaustion. They cook it. They boil it to death.
So if they don't succeed in doing that, then the wasp can basically do what it likes inside the hive.
I've never seen a wasp go inside a hive and do whatever it wants. 60,000 bees will kill you.
I bet. Wow. Now, I'm just going to address the side chat. We've got about close to 100 people watching at the moment.
Yes.
Now, If there are any questions you'd like to ask, any that I've missed, please just feel free to post them. And Melina, if you could just cut and paste any questions. And while I'm just addressing the people watching, we have to thank Melina for actually putting us in touch with Johann. Thanks, Melina. This is a fascinating discussion. And okay, so there's a question here. Will Allergex help if you were stung by a bee?
Will what help?
Allergex, Allergex.
Yeah. Any antihistamine will make a difference. There's a whole lot of things that you can do. What I can tell from experience is that you get stung by a bee and nothing much happens, and then you get stung by the next bee and your eyes are swollen shut, you can't breathe, and you itch. And so the severity of the poison varies from bee to bee. And that's one thing we don't understand, how they do it and why it is like that. But I mean, I got stung, and you basically scrape the stinger out and you don't think much of it.
You don't squeeze it, because then you just put the poison. But then you get stung
by the next bee from another swarm, and you have to go to a medical facility, and you have to get an antihistamine injection.
Now, you raised a very interesting point there, and this is something that everybody who watches this video needs to know, is that if you've been stung, you don't pull it out between two fingers, because all you're going to do is you're going to put the poison straight into your arm. What you do is you actually scrape the sting out, because that way it won't go into your arm. Am I right in saying that?
Ordinary people can scrape it out with a business card or a blade or anything sharp. The more affluent people can scrape it out with a credit card.
The old Visa card.
Anything that you can lay your hands on, basically, scrape it out. Don't squeeze it, because you will basically squeeze all the poison that is in that stinger. You will basically squeeze into your body. So don't grab it with your fingers.
Yeah. Now, what's the most amazing thing you've personally witnessed when it comes to bees and hives and your whole hobby?
The most amazing thing is, and I actually have photographs. I've opened up a cavity once for a person who had bees inside a perimeter wall, and that was the first time in my life where I could actually see the whole process, where in a single piece of honeycomb I could see honey, I saw bee bread, I saw eggs, I saw larvae, and I saw young bees emerging from the honeycomb. The whole cycle in a piece of honeycomb as big as my hand. I could see the whole process. That was fantastic.
That must have been absolutely awesome. Now,
yes.
What is bee bread?
Bee bread is something that the bees, that's basically pollen. So what they do is they will take the pollen and they make a bee bread that they stick when they lay an egg. When a queen lays an egg, she lays the egg inside the honeycomb, which is made by the bees from their wax glands. So they would go and get whatever they need, and they would produce a wax, and they would make a absolutely perfect honeycomb. All of those cavities in a honeycomb is exactly hexagonal, and they are exactly the same size, because if they are too small, the queen can't get in there, and if it's too big, you will produce a queen, which you don't want. So there's a specific reason. If you look at for instance, if you look at a hive, we all use what's called a Langstroth hive. Mr. Langstroth investigated, and he studied the bees, and he created a hive with specific dimensions that encourages the bee to make their honeycomb in straight sections. In other words, they would fill the frames inside the box. If you increase the diameter or increase the dimensions inside a hive by 1 to 2 to 3 millimeters, the bees will just basically build their hive, or they will build their honeycomb wherever they want. So a beehive is specifically designed with the correct measurements and dimensions to encourage the bee to build its honeycomb in a frame so that you can get the frame out and actually retrieve the honey. So a beehive is not just a box. It's a specifically designed piece of equipment that we use to put the bees in and to get them to build their honeycomb in a specific way, so that we can get them out, so that we can work with the bees, so that we can inspect the queen. And it's a science. That's why we do what we do. So in a Langstroth hive, there are specific dimensions, and that's for a reason. So now when the bees go in there and they build their honeycomb, they build it to a specific dimension so that the queen can move between it. She can get her body into the little cavity to lay an egg, and then once she's laid an egg, the egg will stand upright for day 1. Day 2, it will move into a 45-degree angle. In day 3, it will lie down flat, and in day 4, you will get a bee that starts feeding that egg with bee bread and with nectar, and then the bee develops from there, and then they will cap it. And then once it's capped, the bee on the inside will grow to a specific size, and then once it's ready to hatch, it will eat itself out of the honeycomb, and then it will emerge and it will spread its wings and be a bee.
It's absolutely extraordinary. You know,
you have to see this to understand what I'm talking about. I can sit and watch that for ages. It's just amazing.
Oh, it's extraordinary.
It fascinates me every time I see it.
Now you mentioned about honey that's contaminated when it's wild honey.
Yes.
What can the impact of eating contaminated honey have on you?
No, nothing much. I mean, but you are just eating larvae. And you are eating young bee, and you are eating wax, and you are eating. When I say contaminated, I actually mean it's a mixture of everything that goes on in a swarm.
Right.
When you take honey out of a, people must send me pictures, must send me an email or email address so I can send them pictures. In a super on top of a brood box.
Yeah.
If I take out a frame with pure honey, there's nothing in it. It's just pure golden, unadulterated honey. It is the most beautiful thing you've ever seen.
Oh, I love honey.
It's called liquid gold, and for a reason. It is there's not larvae or eggs or nothing in it. You scrape the capping off. You put that frame in a honey extractor. You spin it around so the honey comes out, and that honey just basically flows like liquid gold. It is something I can't explain. You have to see it to believe it, and then you have to taste it. Because the thing is, and I don't know if you know this, people would go into a shopping center and they would pick up a bottle of honey. Legislation in South Africa, I don't know about where you are, but in South Africa, if you put 51% honey in a bottle, you can put 49% of anything else and still call it honey. What people buy in a store of a supermarket shelf is not honey. It is a mixture of all kinds, and you will see that when you pick up a bottle in South Africa, it'll say this honey is a product of South Africa, China, India, Brazil, Egypt, and all other countries, because everybody contributes a different ingredient that they put in there. You only know that you buy real honey when you buy it from a beekeeper, and he extracts it from a hive and have it as pure honey. That is, the stuff that you buy in a supermarket shelf is not pure. It's not honey.
Now, talking about that particular thing, do you have like a brand of honey that you supply to Woolworths or stores?
No.
Okay, so obviously you've got to actually come to Lions and get the honey.
Yeah, well, the thing is, no. I'm not into the fill the little jars and label them and put them on shop shelves. What we do is 90% of the honey that I produce we put it into a 20-liter container, a plastic drum. It is being taken by a number of hospitals. The hospitals will then irradiate the honey with gamma rays, which is basically the same as microwaves, but it does not create the heat. The gamma rays will kill all the bacteria which is in the honey, and that honey will then be used for medical purposes. In other words, if you have had an operation, they cover the operation scar or the operation wound with honey. If you have a bed sore or you have a burn wound, they would cover that with honey. And if you put honey on any injury, like a cut or a bruise or whatever, you will recover 3 times faster than when using any medication produced in a laboratory and being sold in a pharmacy.
Wow. Now, how can people...
That is one of the benefits of honey. We use it for open wound treatment.
Yeah. How can people buy your honey? I mean, look, let's say I'm in Johannesburg and I say, geez, I want to get a liter of your honey. How do people do that?
Well, I'm the beekeeper for the Lions Club, but there are members in the Lions Club that will have honey available. You can phone the Lions Club and order, and if we have, we will either send it to you or you come and collect it, or but I don't do that. I'm the beekeeper. I work with the bees. I look after the hives and I look after the bees, and I get them to produce the honey. But there are Lions Club members, which basically they would swing out the honey. They would prepare it properly, and they would put it in 1 kilogram containers, and then you can come and collect some.
So how much would that cost?
160 rand a kilogram.
That's cheap, isn't it?
Well, we are not really into the honey trade. We are into saving the bees.
Wow.
So we have the honey. Honey is a byproduct of what we do, but we focus mainly on helping the bees to increase their dwindling numbers. That's the focus. Not producing the honey. The Lions Club is not dependent on the finances being generated by the honey. It is just a benefit. But we focus on our project to save the bees, and that is what we do for the environment. So we whatever honey we sell anyway just goes back into acquiring more hives and covering our costs, because it's a costly thing. I mean, a bee suit is 1,500 rand. A pair of gloves is expensive. You have to buy a smoker. You have to buy certain tools. We drive around from site to site. We go and collect swarms. So all of that is as expenses, and that's being covered by the honey production at the moment. But what we do is to save the bees one hive at a time. We want the bees to increase their numbers. That is what we want. You have companies and you have beekeepers in South Africa that focus primarily on producing honey. They sell their product countrywide and even internationally and even into Africa. We don't really want to... Well, we do that because we have the honey, but that's not our main focus. Our main focus is to help the bees to have healthy swarms and to increase their numbers. That's what we do.
Now, honey has so many medicinal benefits. It's incredible stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Now,
Yes.
Marlene has asked, Johann, how can we test for pure raw honey?
Well, I'm not aware that there's a specific test. But from my experiences in the honey that I have is that pure honey will crystallize. In other words, if you have a container with honey and you stick it in a cupboard, it'll crystallize and it'll become solid. And the way to turn this back into a liquid is you just put it in a little bit of warm water and it will become a liquid again, and it'll become honey. Honey that has all other ingredients added to it, like sugar cane or cane sugar or whatever you want to call it, and aluminium sulfate and whatever, that honey will stay in a liquid form. So if you stick it in a cupboard and you leave it there for a month, you will still have the liquid when you take the container out. Whereas if you take absolutely pure honey and you stick it in there and just leave it there, it'll crystallize. That is how I know which honey is which, which is pure and which is not.
Now, we'll get back to the future of bees just now, because that's a hugely important subject. Before we do, there's something I just cannot get my head around, because when I see a bee in my garden, or when I used to see bees in my garden, there was no beehive anywhere near me, and there were fences. There were, they had to fly over fences. They had to, they might have come from 500 meters away. How on earth does a little dance in the hive result in another bee knowing how to find my garden? Get over the fences and all this. I mean, how I can't fathom how that works.
Well, that's one of those things that is so intriguing about the bees, and it fascinates us how clever they are. Because if I put down a swarm of bees in a hive in your garden, the bees will fly out from there in the different directions, north, south, east, and west, 3 kilometers. In other words, wow. A beehive with 60,000 bees will cover 36 square kilometers of vegetation.
Wow.
And in that 36 square kilometers, they will find every plant. They will fly back to the hive. They will communicate that to the rest of the bees, and all those bees will follow them and go and find that plant and extract whatever they can. So if you find a bee in your garden, that bee could be, that hive, the swarm could be as far as 3 kilometers from where your garden is. That's the maximum distance that a bee will fly to go and collect whatever it needs to collect. That's why when you plan a hive site, you try and keep them more than 6 kilometers away from each other. Otherwise, they will just overlap and they will be in competition for the same vegetation.
Right.
So a beehive full of bees will fly out 3 kilometers in either direction to go and find whatever it is that they need. And there's basically nothing that stops them.
Now, you mentioned an email address. Can you tell me what that email address is so I can put into the side chat? How people can contact you?
Easy. My surname is Marx. It's M-A-R-X. What you do is you turn that back to front, and it becomes X-R-A-M.
Let me just type this in. X-R-A-M, yeah?
Yeah, X-R-A-M, which is Marx backwards.
Yeah.
So it's X-R-A-M at
yeah.
netactive, which is Netactive, netactive, one word,
yeah.
.co.za.
Okay, I'm going to put this in the side chat so that people can.
Yeah, that's my personal email address.
Okay.
You can also get me through the Facebook page, but that will go via another person. So that XRAM at netactive.co.za is my own personal email address, and if you send me an email, it'll come up on my computer here at my house in Weltevreden Park, and then we can communicate from there.
Fantastic. Now, look, you raised a very important subject just a few minutes ago, and I said we'll get back to that, and that is, what is the future of bees as far as you're concerned when you consider what's happening with the climate, what's happening with all these different factors, pesticides and stuff like that? Where do you see the bees globally, not just in South Africa?
Well, globally, globally there's a heightened awareness, and that is good. So people are more aware. There's a whole lot of people that are aware but doesn't know what to do and how to get involved, and those we need to educate. And it's a basic question of education. And then eventually bees will reach the status of being endangered if it's not already, and you will get people that make even bigger efforts than what we are doing to try and save the bees. In terms of climate change, there's not a lot that we can do because, there's a lot that we can do to stop the climate from changing, but there's not a lot that we can do to assist the bees to adapt. So what we need to do is we need to create environments for bees where they can basically prosper. So I think some of my beehives are basically inside tunnels, these vegetable tunnels where people grow vegetables inside a tunnel. We have beehives inside that. So the bee doesn't actually have to go out anywhere. He's constantly inside the tunnel, and he has a food source right outside of the hive. I think people should just be aware and create environment for bees so that they can, they have a fight of their own. And I'm sure bees will have the ability to adjust to some extent. But I think there's a whole lot of things that people can do to just assist the process.
Right. Now,
and on that point, there's a whole number of pesticide companies that are now actually taking note, and they are producing their product that is specifically bee friendly. So you do have a whole lot of companies that produce stuff that is harmful to the bees, but to their credit, there's a whole number of companies that are now doing stuff that basically protects the bees or not harm the bees, if I can put it like that.
So tell us which ones are harming the bees. Which products to steer clear of?
That's difficult. I don't have names.
Okay, but
I can tell you there's
the
just
good ones?
household insecticides that people spray spiders and ants and hojas with. There's a whole lot of natural product that people can use instead of going to a supermarket and buying a tin of whatever they can find on a shelf. Don't do that. For instance, let me just give you an example. I've had a rat problem in my house, a rat problem in my ceiling, or I had rats in the ceiling, like a lot of houses have some or other time during the lifespan of the house.
Right.
And instead of putting in poison, which would mean the rats would eat the poison, they would go outside and the dead rat would be picked up by a small dog, a cat, or an owl. I did a little bit of investigation, and I took lavender branches, lavender leaves, lavender shoots, excuse me, and I cut the lavender shoots and I put them in my ceiling, and the rats disappeared.
Wow.
So there's a lot of natural things that people can do to drive away other insects. Like if you have an ant problem, there's a natural thing that you can do to drive away the ants without spraying them with insecticide, which will have an effect on the bees. So people must just move back to nature a bit. Think a bit before you go and buy a pesticide or an insect poison. Just go on the internet and just go on to Google or whatever and ask the question and find out if there's a natural product you can use before buying something that's harmful to the bees.
Right. Now, Michaela's written 5G will kill bees and all insects, including humans. Now, is that correct?
No.
Is microwave...
No, we don't know that. No.
Okay.
That is unfounded. Yeah. That's just a rumor.
Okay. But are bees still able to navigate around these towers?
Yes. Yeah, they do. Well, let me give you just my thoughts on the whole thing. In the decline of the numbers, there's a whole lot of companies internationally that is now doing research on the bees and why the numbers are in decline. And then there was one company that said it's because of pesticides. There is another company that said it's because of internet signals and all kinds that's confusing the bees. And then there's a company that said it's climate change. And there's one person who actually came back with a theory that makes absolute sense. And that is the genetic manipulation of plants.
Ah,
In other words,
all right.
in other words, you are not happy with an apple tree that produces 20 average size apples. You want the apple tree to produce 40 1-kilogram apples. So you fiddle with the DNA. The moment you fiddle with the DNA, that plant goes into a defensive mode because you are fiddling with something you're not supposed to fiddle with. And that plant then produces 40 1-kilogram apples, but in the same instance, it produces something that to protect itself. And the bees will go into that flower and they will pick up whatever genetically modified thing they pick up, and they will take that back to the hive and they would kill the entire swarm. That is the theory that makes the most sense to me. And I'm just a beekeeper. But this there are things in the universe and there are things in creation that we are not supposed to fiddle with. That's just my opinion.
Yeah.
And people fiddle with that, and everything that we do have a consequence. That's just the way nature works. That's the way the world works. You fiddle with something and you have a consequence that you never anticipated or can do something about. And we see that all over the world on all different aspects of life. So I think genetically modified seeds that produces genetically modified plants is what's killing the bees. That's why when I go and I put my hives next to a farmer's field full of sunflowers, I would normally ask the farmer if he's using genetically modified seeds, and if he does, I would politely decline the opportunity to put my hives down there because I'm protecting my bees. That is just my opinion. It's not nobody else's opinion. Cannot vouch for the if I'm right or wrong. That's just the way I feel. Genetically modified is not a good thing, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, look, I totally hear what you're saying. Now, you've got all these beehives all over Gauteng.
Yes.
How do you keep them safe from the vandals?
Well, you ask people to look out for them. You put them in areas where it is basically safe. You visit them regularly, and that's about. And you manage the risk. And then, if by chance, I've lost 13 hives about a month ago, where a construction site went onto the area where my hives are inside a secure suburb, one of these fancy upmarket secure suburbs.
Right.
But they were building a private school in the one corner, and the construction site was just fenced off with an ordinary diamond mesh fence, and some of the subcontractors and cheap labor that was working there climbed over the fence, and they basically destroyed 13 of my hives. There's nothing you can do. As much as you can, you can have somebody to look after them. You can put them in an area where there's not a lot of pedestrians, but it happens. There's not much you can do. But there's people that have tried different hives that are supposed to be vandal proof, if for lack of a better word, but not. I've never seen one that's actually successful. The guy who wants to get into a hive will hit it with an axe or a rock or a brick, or he will just topple it or burn it even to get the bees out, to get to that honey, because he's starving and he needs that sustenance, and it's basically for free. So yeah, it's difficult. It's just one of the risks that we manage.
Michael, was that 300 hives? Michael, one of the people in the side chat, wrote, I lost 300 to arsonists burning all mountains within a 200-kilometer radius of Cape Town.
Yes. That's possible. It happens.
Wow. Crazy. So
it's sad.
What's your... Yeah, Michael says, yes, 300 hives he lost. Incredible. It's
yes,
awful.
That happens.
Now,
that's why we try not to keep all our hives in one area.
Yeah.
I mean, if I investigate a hive site and I look at the surrounding vegetation and I look at the 36 square kilometers from which the bees that I want to put on a specific site can harvest their pollen and their nectar and a water source, you can basically put a maximum of 100 to 120 hives on a hive site. Don't put more of that. Don't put more of your hives in one area. So I've got about I'd say 9 different sites where I keep anything from 10 to 100 hives, and we don't tell people about this. We keep quiet because we also have unscrupulous beekeepers in South Africa that would sign a contract, for instance, to deliver 5 tons of honey to Malawi. And then they would come to a beekeepers meeting, and they would ask you very friendly, and they would make friends with you and ask you about your hives and where they are and whatnot.
Oh,
and then they would go in the middle of the night, and they would go and harvest your honey. I've had that as well. That happened to me. I came to a hive site, and all my supers were empty.
Wow.
And then when I started asking, the security guard said, yeah, there were people here last night or the week before. I thought it was your people harvesting the honey. So it's difficult. It's not easy.
Wow. Now, is there anything you'd like to say to the people who watch this video about bees and the importance of bees? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would love everybody that can make a contribution. If you want to support the Lions Club in South Africa, or even if you want to support the beekeeper in your own area or the Lions Club in your area, it's not really difficult to put up a hive site. You basically need 10 or 20 hives. You need one person that you can train as a beekeeper. and have him look after you. It's not hard work. He can do it after hours and over weekends. But put up a hive site. You will be so surprised as to what you can achieve by just getting up off your chair and deciding to do something, and you identify an area and you go and put down 20 hives, and you will quickly see how those hives become, they populate with bees. The bees move in by themselves. Within a short period you will have honey, and within a short period after that you will start finding out more about bees, and you will start planting basil, and you will start planting lavender, and you will start planting onions and all sorts that the bees love. And as soon as you're hooked, you're a beekeeper. You can't stop. Once you've seen this, and once you've experienced this, this is a part of my life for the rest of my life. I can't stop. It's just fantastic.
Okay, now how does someone become a beekeeper? Do you give courses on what to do and what not to do?
I can, although I don't really have time to do this. Because my beekeeping is not what I do to earn a living. This is it's just my hobby. Right. I do it for the love of the bees, so I don't really have time. But you do get people that offer courses. You can attend those. There's a lot of information available on the internet. We have a book in South Africa called the Blue Book, which is basically the beekeeper's Bible. It tells you everything, or it tells you everything you need to know to start. And beekeepers are really friendly people. They will assist anyone, because I understand that those bees are not my bees. I create an environment for them, and I am grateful that they have taken up the offer to move into my environment that I've created, and that they share their honey with me. And I am eternally grateful, and I will do anything I can to protect my bees. So what you do is you just get up off your backside. You get one hive. Unfortunately, one hive is not financially viable, because if you buy a hive for 1,000 rand and you have to buy a bee suit, which is 1,500 rand, plus a pair of gloves and a smoker and a tool and a whatnot, it's one hive is not financially viable. But go get 5 hives, go get 10 hives, put them down, form a group, get 10 people together, you each sponsor a hive, you put them down, you put the bees in, and you go and visit them once a week. You open them up, you look at them, you talk to them, and very soon you will find a satisfaction that is not achievable by doing anything else. It's just something wonderful.
Fantastic. Now, for those who are in the side chat, could someone actually cut and paste Johann's email address back again into the side chat? And the reason I'm suggesting this is because, Johann, they can obviously email you, and you'll point them in the right direction to where they can get training on to becoming a beekeeper.
Yes.
Okay,
I can do that.
Fantastic. All right, now, are there any further questions people would like to ask? Oh, yeah, there is one here. I'm sorry, Leslie, I've just seen it. Now, Leslie asks why bees came and killed a pair of her African grey parrots and took over their nest.
There are specific things that we still do not understand that bees don't really like. For instance, if you come across a swarm of bees on a sweaty horse, the bees will attack you. If you mow your lawn and you get close to a swarm of bees, I don't know if it's the smell of the freshly mowed lawn, or the hum of the lawnmower, or the smell of the operator. We don't know, but there are specific things that bees they don't like. They don't like the smell of chickens. You do not put a hive site next to a chicken farm. You're going to have problems. The bees will go and attack those chickens. It's just one of those things. We don't know. And then we also don't know, sometimes your bees are docile. They are happy, they fly about, and they are looking for a new cavity to occupy, because that is what bees do. They will form a swarm. The swarm will then occupy a cavity, and then when they are successful, just before spring, that swarm will divide. So they make a new queen, and the old queen will depart with half the swarm. That is how the bees keep their numbers going. They divide. So the swarm that leaves now has to find a new cavity, and they need to find a new nest or area to occupy. So it might be that those bees flew around. They decided this is the place to be. They didn't like the smell of the African greys. One bee stung an African grey, and it activated all the other defending bees to just basically attack it. We don't know. You can't say. I have an African grey myself. He lives in the garden here next to my front door, and I've got six hives just outside my front door, because what I do is I will go and remove a swarm of bees, and then I will put them in a hive right on my property, and I will look after them until they're settled, until they're strong, and until they're functioning, and then I will take them out to a hive site. So I have a continuous stream of hives moving through my property in a suburb in Randburg, where I live. And none of my animals have ever been attacked. I think one of my dogs took a sting on the nose once. And that's about it. So you don't know. They're unpredictable.
I've just put your email back into the side chat so that people can email you.
Email me.
Yeah. Now, okay, so really the message that we're giving out today is that the bee population around the world is under threat. I mean, that's
decline, yes.
That's the bottom line, and that's globally. It's not just South Africa. No. And the impact that has potentially on food production is enormous.
Yes.
Okay, so you could actually say catastrophic, because if there were no bees.
Well, eventually, yeah, if we end up with no bees, yeah, we will have to find another way to pollinate the plants that produce whatever we eat. So, I don't know. Maybe by then we have little robots flying around doing that. But, I mean, we can just think about it. If we do not have the pollinators to pollinate the plants that needs pollination to produce whatever fruit or vegetable it produces, then we're going to have a shortage of food. We do have a whole lot of plants that do not need pollination, or that can do that gets pollinated by the wind or by any other form or any other insect. But 80% of what you and I eat is the direct result of a bee visiting that plant, carrying the pollen from one part of the plant to another part so that it can be pollinated, and that plant can produce whatever it produces, whether it be an onion or a peach or whatever. So yeah, I think we should look after the bees. It is a worthwhile cause.
Yeah. Just for the record, we've got over 100 people watching the live stream
Fantastic.
At the moment. Now, are there any other questions people watching would like to ask? And Marlene, if you've got any copied there, if you could just put them through. I just still find it, there's got to be some kind of psychic connection with the bees. You know, you talked about them splitting off. Half of them just go away and set up another hive. How do the ones know to go and the rest know to stay? I mean,
we don't know.
It's extraordinary.
We don't know. We just observe that is what they do. They split. They split hives. We can artificially split hives. I mean, that is what we do. I will take a hive with 60,000 bees, and I will give them a queen chamber, and the queen in there will lay an egg, and then you count the days from when the egg is basically in the queen chamber, and 2 days before or a day before it hatches, I will take that swarm and I will split it into 2 hives. So we do that to help the bees. But if we don't do that, they do that by themselves.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's why we do what we do, because we've observed them and we saw what they did. And once we realized that this is what they do, not knowing how they do it or when they decide to do it or what motivates them to do it, we just decided that we are going to do the same. So I can raise a queen if I want to, and I do, and I will take I will take 20 of my hives and I will split them into 40 hives. That's what we do. That's why we are beekeepers, and that's what we do to help the bees. And then sometimes we are successful, and then sometimes we are not. Sometimes I split a hive into 2, and the new queen that I give them, she dies. So
Oh, wow.
we don't know. And then then that swarm is basically lost. Then they fly off, they find a cavity of their own, and they produce a new queen by themselves. And they are lost to me, but they're not lost as bees. They will just go and settle somewhere else. So we don't know. Sometimes I'm hugely successful, and that is what keeps my interest, because I'm constantly trying to do the best that I can for the bees, and 50% of the time the bees will just show me that I'm not in control. I cannot dictate to the bees what to do. I cannot force them to do what I want them to do. I'm a beekeeper.
Oh, we've lost your audio. Johann, we've lost your audio. Johann, we lost your audio there.
Better?
That's better, yeah. Just could you repeat the last few sentences you said?
Yeah, I said what we do is we do it. It keeps my interest in the bees is basically motivated by the fact that I'm not 100% successful in whatever I do.
Right.
I do my best to create an environment for the bees to live in and to prosper. And if they decide to stay, I talk to them and I thank them and I'm grateful and I observe and I help them. And but other times I would create that environment. I would split a swarm. I will give them a new queen, and that queen will just fly away with the swarm. And I don't know why. And there's nothing I can do to retrieve them. They are not dead. They are not lost to the bee population. They just decide they don't want to stay with me, and they don't like me or my face, or they don't like the environment that I created. I don't know. And then I just keep going, and I just create the same environment for the next batch, and until I'm successful. And we just keep going. That's fantastic. That is what keeps me going, is that I never know if I'm going to be successful or not. If they stay, it's their decision. It's not mine. I can't force the bees to do anything.
Yeah. For those who've just joined the live stream, we've covered just about everything on bees there is to cover, and it's been an absolutely amazing discussion. And Johann, you obviously know your subject extremely well. A lot of people here are just absolutely fascinated by what you had to say about bees, and I still can't get over how they navigate to a garden bed up to 3 kilometers away from the hive just by some silly little dance in the hive. I mean, that just, to me, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, that's how they do it, because we've observed them doing it.
Yeah.
Some of the scientists studying the bees have even figured out what the little dance moves are. So we can actually look at a bee, and by observing its movements inside the hive, we can basically predict where that bee is going.
So give us an idea of like a wiggle. What does that mean?
Well, there's I haven't studied it myself, but they move in the shape of an 8, or they go round and round, or they point in a different, they point in a direction, or the height of the abdomen. They put their little faces, their little heads down, and they raise their abdomen, and every little thing that they do means something to the rest of the bees in the hive.
Wow.
So I don't know what those are, but I do know they do a dance, and that's how they tell the other bees where that food source is, because and in that way they save a whole lot of energy, and they save a whole lot of hassle, because if every bee in the swarm is just left to search by themselves for a food source, the bees will work their little backsides off and not be too successful. But if one bee comes back to the hive and he can tell 60,000 other bees that he's found a food source, those other bees don't have to search for anything. They can just go and fetch. Yeah. So it makes sense.
It's quite extraordinary.
Oh yes.
We've been on for nearly 2 hours, and what I'll be doing is I'll be archiving this video, which means it'll just stay on YouTube. So if you want to promote it to Lions Club or people who are interested in beekeeping or something like that, I'll actually send you the YouTube address, so you can just put that into Facebook or wherever, because I think we've pretty well covered everything. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to talk about?
No, I just think people should get involved.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think people should form clubs, and they should start talking to beekeepers in their area. And if there's a beekeeper, assist the man. You're not assisting the beekeeper, you're assisting the bees. So make an effort, get out there, start finding out what you can plant, start finding out bees need water. It's a very important part of what they need to sustain themselves. So there's lots of people that say I'm planting what I think bees would love, and that bees lots of nectar and whatever. There's different plants, there's different indigenous plants, there's different trees that attract bees, but find out what the bees need. Find out if there's a water source. Put out a bucket of water, and take a brick or a rock and put it in the water so that the bees have something to sit on while they collect the water. You will see, and I think most people that have swimming pools, they will find dead bees in the swimming pools. It's because that bee has got nowhere to land to actually collect his little bit of water. So create a little something for them to sit on safely, where they can collect whatever water they want, and that little droplet stick to their paws or their feet or their wings, and they can take off. And bees are, if there's nothing for them to sit on, they will keep on trying, because they are programmed to do that. And if they fall in the swimming pool, they will just die.
Yeah.
So help the bees, assist them, find out what bees like, find out what bees do, find out what the bees need, give them, put out a little sugar water. It's not going to cost you an arm and a leg, but it might help a bee to go and produce a little bit of honey for young bees, so that they can grow up healthy and strong.
Now, Melina, have I missed any questions? If there are, can people just retype them in? Because I'll be shutting down the stream shortly, because it's getting late in South Africa, and it's been absolutely fascinating. I mean, I know a little bit about bees, but I've learnt a whole lot tonight. I mean, it's been quite extraordinary.
That's fantastic. You're going to go and get a hive now.
I will certainly think about it.
Go and get one.
Now, Diervolds asked, where can we buy bees?
You see, that's the difficult thing. You do get, I believe, bee keepers and whatnot that will send you a swarm of bees with a queen. I don't really know about that. I've never bought bees in my life. We are in the fortunate situation in South Africa where at the beginning of September, when it's spring, we basically put the hives out. We have something called a catch box. We have a little bit of tricks up our sleeve to entice the bees to go in there. So we basically take the frames on the inside and we spray them with lemongrass oil. Some of my hives I will put a banana skin in. Some of my hives I will put a piece of burnt newspaper in. And I've been lucky so far. I've never bought a swarm of bees in my life. I will put out a box, and I will take some honey from another hive, and I will take a brush and brush the frames on the inside with raw honey that I got from some other hives. And within 2 days there will be activity, and within 5 days I will have a new swarm in my box. So you just put out a catch box and they will come. If you create the space for them and you create the environment for them, because the frames on the inside of a beehive also has a little strip of honeycomb. For a starter, you have a line of beeswax that you put inside the frame so that the bees know where to start to build their new fresh honeycomb, and that all of that attracts the bees no end. They love it. You put down a hive, and within 2 days you should have bees.
Now, Melina's asked, does it affect the bees if they drink chlorinated water?
Not that I know of, because we drink chlorinated water, and I mean, the chlorinating, the chlorine which is in a swimming pool is so diluted that will not affect the bees.
Right. All right, guys, look, I'm sure you'll agree with me. It's been an absolutely fascinating discussion. And I just got to say, those little bee critters are incredibly smart. I mean, I hadn't realized how smart they were. And Johann, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, Marlena. The way this actually happened, I can quickly tell you. I removed a swarm of bees from the editor of a regional newspaper. And when we removed the bees, she said, "What can I do to assist the bees?" And I said, "You can put us all on the front page of your newspaper." And they took pictures, and they actually did a whole write-up, and I got front page and page 3 in a local newspaper called the Krugersdorp News.
Oh,
And that is where Malena picked up the newspaper
Yeah.
and saw me, and my number is published there for anybody in South Africa wants to contact me. And then she phoned me and said, "Listen, you have to be ready to speak to Scott." And I said, "What? I can do that. Talk to me." And she basically set all of this up. So thank you, Malena.
yeah, well,
You did well.
I have to tell you, I used to live in Krugersdorp, in
Yeah.
a suburb called Rantendal.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's exactly where I removed the swarm of bees.
Oh,
the house
really?
of the Krugersdorp News editor.
Fascinating. All right, guys,
Yes.
look, I hope you've enjoyed tonight's live stream. As I say, I found it absolutely fascinating. Marlena, thank you so much. That's been a wonderful contact, and we'll be leaving this video up so that, as I say, I'll send Johann the link so he can put it out there to his friends, etc., or people wanting
Thank
to
you.
know more about bees. All right, guys, have a great evening. Please be safe. Take care. And once again, Johann, thank you so much. It's really been appreciated, your input. And,
Anytime. You're welcome.
and thank you, Marlena, and thank you the other moderators who've been here, and also if everybody has taken the time to watch this live stream. I'm going to shut off now, and take care. Bye for now.